So I decided to look at CARM on homosexuality after Matt Slick's horrific appearance on the Bible-thumping Wingnut show after the right to marriage for same-sex couples was affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was Christians are going to be persecuted, the Bible ban is hate speech, other over-the-top nonsense. Persecution porn for the paranoid. So I'm going to start by looking at what is said about homosexuality in the section CARM. Homosexuality, cut and paste info. Now the first thing I want to point out is Matt's rather strange indexing. If you notice, he starts with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and then under that, for subsections, also uses the same Arabic numerals. In this video, I'm going to change this to standard indexing. So here you can see I have changed subsection 1 to A. So, number 1, agenda. The homosexuals want acceptability, recognition, and approval. A. Homosexuals want others in society to think like them and behave like them. They are working hard to change moral, social, and political opinion to be more in line with what they want. They are not content to be what they want to be. They want others to accept them. They want others' opinions to change and conform to their ideology and behavior. What gives them the right to try to change society into what they want it to be? Gee, I don't know. Why do fundamentalist Christians want to change society into what they want it to be, or any other group for that matter? Also note that Matt says homosexuals want society to behave like them or conform to their behavior. I wonder what kind of behavior he's talking about. And as for the sentence, they are not content to be what they want to be, someone is going to have to translate that into English for me. Number 2, the animal kingdom. Homosexuality occurs in the animal world, therefore it is natural. A. Saying that homosexuality is natural because it occurs in the animal kingdom does not mean it is morally correct. Animals also eat each other alive, devour offspring, etc. Should we imitate those things as well because the animals do it? Of course not. Well, animals also don't carry on war after, you know what I mean. And this, homosexuality occurs in the animal world, is simply a response to the homosexuality is not natural argument. It's not meant to be an argument for homosexuality. Also, we are animals, and not all animals eat each other alive, devour offspring, etc. B. From an evolutionary perspective, how does homosexuality further the development and distribution of the human species? It cannot. Homosexuality would obviously work for self-extermination. Therefore, how is it natural if what it leads to is self-destruction? It would seem that natural selection would have removed the gene for homosexuality, since it would not lead to reproduction. It would seem then that homosexuality is not natural, but is a learned behavior. I'm going to use Greek letters here to distinguish what I am saying versus what Matt is saying. So alpha, the urge to parent, is universal. Just because homosexuals don't have sex with the same sex doesn't mean that they don't want to be parents, and doesn't mean that they won't have sex with a member of the opposite sex in order to be a parent. I understand alcohol helps quite a bit. Beta, in a social species, there is an advantage to have a non-breeding population. That is, of course, assuming that all homosexuals would be a non-breeding population. When you have a non-breeding population, you have a group of people that are available to, take care of the elderly, to take care of children, to assist in the care of children, or to adopt children that have lost their parents. So we see that happening now. A lot of homosexuals adopt children or take in foster children. 3. Born as homosexuals. If homosexuals are born that way, it would be natural to them. A. There is no proof that homosexuals are born that way. Research is all over the place, and no conclusive evidence is shown that demonstrates they are born that way. Now note, research is all over the place, and no conclusive evidence. Well, where are your references for research is all over the place and no conclusive evidence? Let's look at this again. There is no proof that homosexuals are born that way. Well, that's incorrect. Here are some studies. Alpha. Genetic and environmental effects on same-sex sexual behavior. A population study of twins in Sweden. Langstrom et al. From the Archive of Sexual Behavior in 2010. Beta. Genetic and environmental influence on sexual orientation as it correlates in an Australian twin sample. Bailey et al. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, March 2000. Gamma. Genetic factors predisposing to homosexuality may increase mating success in heterosexuals. Brendan Prezich et al. Evolution in Human Behavior, November 2008. Delta. PET and MRI show differences in cerebral asymmetry and functional connectivity between homo and heterosexual subjects. Savick and Lindstrom. And by the way, I will leave links for all of these. Epsilon, Sexually Antagonistic Selection in Human Male Homosexuality by Campiero et al. Zeta, Homosexuality as a Consequence of Epigenetically Canalized Sexual Development by Rice et al. B, if a behavior is said to be natural to a person and this is why homosexuality should be accepted, is it not also natural that people lie and so they too should be accepted? Children don't need to be taught how to lie. It appears natural to them. Should we then say that because the behavior of lying is natural to people, there should be special privileges for them and accept their behavior in society because that's just the way they're born and that is their truth orientation? Let's see if we can break this down. 1, homosexuality is innate and involuntary. 2, lying is voluntary except in the case of some mental illnesses, so this is a false comparison. 4, freedom like anyone else. A, they are already free to marry a person of the opposite sex, the same as anyone else. It's a ridiculous argument. Homosexuals aren't attracted to the opposite sex. Why on earth would they want to marry one? B, they can still get married and express love, own businesses, own property, have sexual relations, receive an inheritance, etc. They can still get married. I assume he's referring to A, in which case, again, ridiculous argument. C, for homosexuals to advocate redefining marriage so it can include a union between a man and a man and a woman, and to have it protected legally is to want special rights for them due to their behavior. If behaviors are granted legal protection, then what about the behaviors of pedophilia, jump roping, and scuba diving? Should those behaviors also be given political protection? Well, here you're conflating orientation with behavior, and this is nothing but deflection. To say nothing of the fact that scuba divers must really love being lumped in with pedophiles. D, yes, they are free to love, hate, work, eat, etc., but they want marriage redefined to suit their behavior of same-sex intercourse. Again, conflating orientation with behavior, i.e. intercourse. Marriage, as nearly everyone knows, is about a lot more than sex. A lot more. Especially after a couple has been married a few years. Heterosexual marriage has been redefined many times in the past. As Justice Ginsburg said, same-sex couples wouldn't be asking for this relief if the law of marriage was what it was a millennium ago. I mean, it wasn't possible. Same-sex unions would not have opted into the pattern of marriage. Yes, it was marriage between a man and a woman, but the man decided where the couple would be domiciled. It was her obligation to follow him. There was a change in the institution of marriage to make it egalitarian when it wasn't egalitarian, and same-sex unions wouldn't fit into what marriage was once. So marriage has already changed. And if you look back a little further, you say women were not equal in marriage in the past and were under the control of their husbands. For example, look at what Justice William Blackstone, the famous 18th century jurist, said in his Commentaries on the Laws of England, Book 1, Chapter 15, of Husband and Wife. By marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage, or at least is incorporated and consolidated into that of the husband, under whose wing, protection, and cover she performs everything, and is therefore called in our law, French, femme couvert, married woman, is said to be couvert baron, or under the protection and influence of her husband, her baron or lord, and her condition during her marriage is called her coverture. Justice Blackstone, however, said something interesting in the beginning of his commentary on marriage. In the second paragraph, he says, our law considers marriage in no other light than as a civil contract. The holiness of the matrimonial state is left entirely to the ecclesiastical law, the temporal courts not having jurisdiction to consider unlawful marriage as a sin, but merely as a civil inconvenience, which confirms that marriage was historically considered a legal contract subject to the state. Going back to CARM. E, freedom requires responsibility. 1, people are not free to rob banks, to murder, to steal, etc. Well, okay, this is completely irrelevant to the right to marry. I'm going to go to 2 fairly quickly. Simply saying they aren't free to marry who they want isn't a good enough objection because a person's not free to marry another person who's already married, brother and sister, pedophiliac, a person not free to marry an animal, not free to marry another person against that person's will. If the freedom to marry whoever you want is a litmus test for marriage, then marriage will become meaningless as people redefine it to include all of the above. Well, apparently Mr. Slick doesn't understand the term consenting adults, and or would rather bring in everything, including the kitchen sink, or in this case, marrying animals, rape, etc. I'm surprised he left out marrying objects. 3. If we allow and promote homosexual marriage, then shouldn't we also allow and promote polygamy, polyandry, brothers and sisters getting married, pedophiliacs marrying children, and adults marrying animals, cats and dogs living together? If not, why not? See above. A bit redundant, aren't we? As for multiple people marrying, as long as society can come up with a workable legal solution, then who cares? 5. Health. This is where it gets kind of interesting. Is homosexuality harmful to society? The statistics say yes. Why then is it protected and promoted by the government? Now, I've inserted some Greek letters here to make it easier for me to reference these things later. Alpha. 28% of homosexual men had more than 1,000 partners, 43% more than 500, 83% more than 50, 79% more, say over half of sex partners are strangers. Now, this comes from Bell and Weinberg, page 308 to 309. And the reference for this is Exodus Global Alliance. Beta. In 2008, over 1.1 million in the United States were infected with HIV. And this comes from the CDC. Gamma. 19% of men who have sex with men are infected with HIV, 44% unaware that they are infected. This also comes from the CDC. Delta. Worldwide, 1% infected with HIV. This comes from the Body, and the Body is a site that has a lot of current HIV information. Epsilon. Men who have sex with men is 4% of the population. Okay. Yet has HIV 44 times the rate of other men. And this is also from the CDC. And you'll notice at the very end I have a little zeta because that's a comment I'm going to make. So let's look at this. Okay, heterosexual sexual behavior can be harmful too. Look at all the STDs heterosexual get. Why then is it promoted and protected? However, let's look at Matt's statistics. Alpha. The statistic is from Homosexualities, a study of diversity among men and women, published in 1979 by Alan P. Bell and Martin S. Weinberg. Number 1. Now, this was done in 1979, and the data was gained in the mid-1970s. And the older the research is, the less likely that it reflects the overall homosexual community. This is a hidden community wary of trusting even those who appear to be sympathetic because they have been betrayed too often. 2. This is not a random sample of the community. The data was gathered from 1. 22% from single spars, 2. 9% from gay bass, 3. 6% from public places, guys hanging out in parks to find sex, 4. 5% from private bars, i.e. sex clubs, 5. 23% personal contacts, people at bar, people, etc. knew, and 6. 29% from public advertising plus organizations plus mailing lists. Now, the above percentages do not total 100% because they are rounded. So as you can see, this is not exactly a random sample. This is the people they were able to get to. Number 3, this is San Francisco only and during the sexual revolution of all things. 4, the heterosexual data was not included. Yeah, they collected the data on heterosexuals too, but they didn't include that data in their report, so therefore there's no control group. And 5, the study includes bisexuals in with homosexuals. Now, the above statistic has been carefully selected from a book that is, for the most part, shows a positive view of homosexuals. You will notice that this is from page 308. I see the statistic from page 308 all over the internet, and yet I never see any of the other results from this study quoted. This is also a study done under the auspices of the Kinsey Institute. I find it amusing that Slick likes using these statistics since he and others of his ilk despise the work of the Kinsey Institute. So I guess what comes from Kinsey is okay if it promotes your position, but not if it doesn't. Beta. In 2008, over 1.1 million in the United States were infected with HIV, which does not specifically deal with homosexuality since there are various ways to contract the HIV virus. Gamma. 19% of men who have sex with men are infected with HIV, 44% unaware that they are infected. The percentage currently is 15%, however, that's not important. Yes, HIV entered the male homosexual community in this country first. However, worldwide HIV infections are mostly in the heterosexual community. It is just chance that caused HIV to start in the male homosexual community. Delta. Worldwide, 1% are infected with HIV. Now, this is very disingenuous since most people in the world who are infected with HIV are heterosexuals. Epsilon. Men who have sex with men is 4% of the population. Got that is in there again. Yes, this is a disproportionate percentage of HIV infections in the male homosexual community. Female homosexuals, however, have HIV infection rates so small they are statistically insignificant, and there are only a handful of confirmed cases where a woman got HIV from another woman. There is a disproportionate percentage of HIV infections in the black community. So what conclusions does that imply, Matt? And my own comment here, Zeta. I love how lesbians are always left out of these statistics. If they were considered and using the same logic, then it would be best if everyone were a lesbian. 6. Love. A. Homosexuals say that they should be able to marry who they love, but why is this true? What if the person wants to marry someone who is already married, or is a child, and so on and so forth? Okay, this is more redundancy, and can't you come up with a new argument? Also, what part of a consenting relationship between adults do you still not understand? Whatever Slack Co. consider what the measure of marriage validity is, their opinion should not shape law for everyone. 7. Population percentages. A. Based on the 2013 NHIS data, 96.6% of adults identified as straight, 1.6% identified as gay and lesbian, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what? Besides, just looking at the 1.6, which is very inaccurate given numerous studies done, we have of the entire U.S. population as of July 5th of this year, so there are approximately 5,139,587 people who acknowledge they are gay. And by the way, if Matt hasn't been living under a rock, he might have noticed that more and more young people are coming out and saying that they're somewhere in the middle of being gay and straight, not exactly one thing or another. 8. Questions. Is it okay for the schools to teach their children that homosexuality is just another acceptable lifestyle when their own parents disagree? If so, what gives the homosexuals the right to contradict the moral values of the parents and have that taught to the children under the desires of the parents? Doesn't that undermine the moral position of the parents, and is that right to do? If you say it's not a moral issue, then you are saying sexual behavior is not a moral issue, and therefore adultery, etc., would not be moral issues either. I wonder how many parents have committed adultery. Or are married for a second or a third or fourth. Okay, but I guess that's not relevant. Anyway, the assumption here is that all parents disagree. What about the parents who want their children to be informed about the diversity of the world? Public education should teach facts. According to psychology, homosexuality is just a normal variant of sexuality. Parents have the right to teach what they want in their homes, but what is taught in schools should be according to what educators have determined is best. And here we go with muddying the waters with other things. Don't you folks ever get tired of this nonsense? A. Can you please offer a definition of what marriage should be? How about what marriage is? This is from the Legal Information Institute at Cornell University Law School, a very fine university. It says, the legal union of a couple as spouses. The basic elements of a marriage are 1. The parties' legal ability to marry each other, 2. Mutual consent of the parties, and 3. A marriage contract as required by law. Beta. Which is far better than what marriage was? From Justice Ginsburg. Again. Indeed, the idea of marriage as the voluntary union of two lawful equals is hardly one that goes back millennia, or even to our nation's founding. For much of American history, women who got married actually lost their civil identities as individuals, being seen in the eyes of the law only as the wives of their husbands, who had all the legal rights. In the 19th century, it was considered a major reform to allow a woman to keep her own property in her own name after she married, rather than having it automatically transferred to her husband. A more recent reform is that a wife is not automatically considered to have given consent to her husband for sexual intercourse. Marriage as it is practiced in our country is hardly millennia old. Much of what defined marriage in U.S. history would today be struck down as violating the rights of women under the 14th Amendment. When a New York court in the 1980s struck down that state's rape exemption that allowed men to rape their wives, the judge opened his opinion with this quotation from John Stuart Mill's 1869 essay, The Subjection of Women. Marriage is the only actual bondage known to our law. There remain no legal slaves except the mistress of every house. But the court that struck down the spousal rape exemption more than a century after that was written was not engaged in an illegitimate redefinition of marriage. It was simply enforcing his 14th Amendment, as the Supreme Court is being asked to do today. So marriage has been redefined many times. 9. Rights civil. A. Civil rights. 1. Homosexuals already have the same civil rights and restrictions as everyone else. They are able to hold jobs, marry people of the opposite sex, use the same bathrooms as anyone else, vote, etc. But marriage is not a civil right, it's a privilege. The same as the behavior of driving a car is a privilege, not a right. Well, no and no. That's all I can say. Homosexuals are using the civil rights movement to force their moral agenda on the rest of society. A moral agenda based on sexual behavior. Again, no and no. It's not based on behavior, but Matt's too slow to get that. 3. Unalienable rights are given by God according to the Declaration of Independence in the USA. A. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, first of all, the Declaration of Independence is not law. B. These rights are irrespective of skin color, gender, age, etc. They are not based on behavior. If they were, then parachutists should get special rights, along with and so on and so forth. And again, he's conflating orientation with behavior. C. What is to prevent pedophiliacs? Oh, for goodness sakes, Matt. Again, conflating orientation with behavior. And again, what part of consenting adults, humans, do you not understand? 10. Rights. Special rights based on behavior. Again, conflating orientation with behavior. This is getting tiresome. A. Homosexuals have the same rights under the law as do all people in America, except the right to marry. Oh, at least before now. The same laws apply to everyone equally. Oh, what about that marriage thing? Laws often have restrictions. Behaviors are not civil rights. Stretching every day is not a civil right, nor is going to the gym. And sexual behavior of homosexuals is not a civil right. It is a behavior, and the homosexuals are hiding under civil rights in order to change the meaning of marriage and force society into accepting it as normal. I'm just going to shorten conflating orientation with behavior for COB for convenience. B. Do marry the same sexes to request special treatment by having special laws passed that politically approve of special, oops, didn't put that there, did he? A particular sexual behavior, homosexual behavior, and redefine what marriage is to include homosexual marriage. This, by this definition, is special right. COB. C. You have the same right as everybody else. You have the right to marry someone of the opposite sex, and so on and so forth. COB. D. Alpha. Marriage has been defined for millennia as being between a man and a woman. Every society that I know of has defined it as being between a man and a woman. So the homosexuals have now gained through political power and social momentum to, beta, reconstruct the social and political norm to suit their preferences. Gamma, they excuse their sexual preferences under the mask of equal rights, but it isn't equal rights. Delta, it's special rights because they want the definition of marriage redefined for their special, particular preferences. Okay, let's look at this. Alpha. Proof that marriage has been defined for millennia is between a man and a woman and across all societies. Well, there's evidence that that isn't true, including 1. Ford and Beach, Patterns of Sexual Behavior, published in 1951. Their research includes information about human sexual behavior from 191 different cultures before some of these cultures were thoroughly contaminated by Western culture. They devoted a chapter to male and female homosexual activity using information on homosexuality from 76 societies and found that male homosexual activities were regarded favorably in 49. That's 64%. Now, some of these 76 societies had already been contaminated by Western culture, so we don't know what the results would be without that influence. 2. Well, how about a few verses from the Bible? Exodus 21:10. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. Deuteronomy 21:15. If a man have 2 wives, one husband, and one beloved, and another hated, and they have borne him children both, the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers, that was hated. 1 Kings 11:4. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Not a man and a woman. Oh dear. Always got to bring up pedophiles, don't they? Pedophiles are now asking for rights too, and they're using the same arguments initially presented by the homosexual movements decades ago. This is from the GreeleyGazette.com. Now, it's actually called the North Colorado Gazette, and here it is, written by somebody called Jack Miner in 2011. This is a screenshot from the Gazette. Let's look at what it says. Number one, Before You Act, which is apparently some organization, calls pedophiles minor attracted people. The organization's website states its purpose is to help mental health professionals learn more about attraction to minors and to consider the effects of stereotyping, stigma, and fear. And four, yeah, I'm skipping because I'm going to consider these two together. Earlier this year, 2 psychologists in Canada declared that pedophilia is a sexual orientation just like homosexuality or heterosexuality. Okay, a website from one group and the opinions of 2 psychologists do not make any kind of consensus. It looks to me as if the authors of this article and Matt Slick are reaching to try to tie homosexuality with pedophilia. 2. In 1998, the APA issued a report. Now, I'm going to go over this again. In 1998, the APA issued a report claiming that the negative potential of adult sex with children was overstated and that the vast majority of both men and women reported no negative sexual effects from childhood sexual abuse experiences. Well, helps to look this stuff up. So this is from the American Psychological Association, the APA. This is what they're talking about. A meta-analytic examination of assumed properties of child sexual abuse using college samples by Rind, Bruce, Shomanovich, and a bunch of other people. And anyway, you can read the thingy if you want. You can look it up if you want. But this is not a report by the APA, but an article in an APA journal. Journals published lots of articles. And a very quick look on Google Scholar found a lot of journal articles that disagreed with this, including some that cited this very report, such as the following. Association between self-reported childhood sexual abuse and adverse psychosocial outcomes results from a twin study by Nelson et al. Conclusions. Self-reported CSA, child sexual abuse, was associated with increased risk for adverse outcomes, controlling for family background. Family background risk factors also were associated with adverse outcome risk. Discordant pair analysis seems to provide an effective means of controlling for family background risk factors. Picking a single journal article that allows you to present a false impression is to lie. Something it seems Matt Slick has no problem with as long as it furthers his agenda. 3. Pedophilia has already been granted protection status by the federal government. The Matthew Shephard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act lists sexual orientation as a protected class. However, it does not define the term. Republicans attempted to add an amendment specifying that, quote, pedophilia is not covered as an orientation, unquote. However, the amendment was defeated by Democrats. Representative Alcee Hastings stated that all alternative sexual lifestyles should be protected under the law. Quote, this bill addresses our resolve to end violence based on prejudice and to guarantee that all Americans, regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability, or all of these philias and fetishes and isms that were put forward need not live in fear because of who they are. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this rule. And the White House praised the bill, saying, at root, this isn't just about our laws. This is about who we are as a people. This is about whether we value one another, whether we embrace our differences rather than allowing them to become a source of animus. So what does it say? Well, this is subsection 2 of, I'm not sure what that little symbol means, but 249. Protects a wider class of victims. Subsection A2 criminalizes acts of violence and attempts to commit violent acts undertaken with a dangerous weapon when motivated by the actual or perceived gender, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity of any person. It will also apply to violent acts motivated by animus against those religions and national origins which were not considered to be races at the time the 13th Amendment was passed. This portion of the statute was passed pursuant to Congress's Commerce Clause authority. Thus, to obtain a conviction, the government must prove that the crime was in or affected interstate or foreign commerce. This subsection of the statute contains a detailed description of the ways the Commerce Clause element may be fulfilled. Okay, now, there is a difference between a pedophile, someone who's attracted to children, and a child molester. We do not punish people for crimes not committed. Yes, sexual orientation was not defined, and neither were terms like race, gender, gender orientation, and others, including violent acts and dangerous weapons. If we are to strictly define all terms used in legislation, we would never get anything done. That is for the courts. You may also notice that this protects religion, too. And yeah, this bill may protect pedophiles, but so does the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of the United States, and our entire body of law. And I don't see Matthew Slick complaining about that. So my question to Matt Slick is, why are you lying? There are only three possibilities here. Matt Slick is very stupid. I don't believe this. Matt Slick has not read these references, but passes them on anyway because he doesn't care about the truth, but just what supports his beliefs. Matt Slick has read these references, but uses them anyway because he doesn't care about the truth, but just what supports his beliefs. Allowing one's bigotry against homosexuals to cause one to deliberately disseminate false and misleading information in order to denigrate homosexuals is to lie. So, Matt Slick, why are you lying? Anyway, thank you, everyone. Some Flamingo friends and I would like to say thank you. Goodbye.